Okay, everyone. So my name is Isha. Again, can everyone see the screen where it's just like I said, just a brief overview so we can kind of keep up with where we are.
Yes, I'm seeing the screen.
Wonderful. So a brief overview. Of course, if you found me through the Facebook, it'll say Tobaisha, but I don't go by that professionally. My name is Isha. I'm an RN. I've been an RN for quite a few years now. I also have my bachelor's degree. I've recently started with. I am a proctor for Mississippi CNA, so I do the written test and I also administer the skills test. That's a little bit about me. I've done some tutoring with some students out of Texas, Georgia, Mississippi, of course, and currently working on getting settled with other places as well. So to start off, I said this is a 1 hour power session to help you pass with confidence. Again, that means we're going to move relative quickly so I can try to hear you up and get through the basics of everything. Also, if everyone could save their questions to the end, or if I like specifically ask a question, um, that'll help kind of move things a little more thoroughly so I can cover everything, not have to repeat stuff numerous times, and to let everyone get on one page. At this time, the Zoom is not locked, but if people start coming and going and they're coming in, distracting or loud or anything like that, I will lock the Zoom. But at this time, it's not locked. So if something's going on, your device disconnects or anything of that nature, you'll be able to rejoin. So goals for this are gonna be again, where by the end of the session, you should feel more confident with key CNA concepts. Understand how to break down those questions and know what to focus on when studying. So, like I said, reviewing high yield CNA topics. That's going to be, your infection control, safety, the basics of being a CNA. And what I do see a lot when people tend to not pass their test, it's they are overstepping the field of what they can do as a CNA and then kind of going into the scope of practice of what more so nurses would do. And I do understand in certain facilities, if you are working as a unlicensed personnel right now, or you interning or anything of that nature, and there's really kind of a blurred line of boundaries. It can be confusing, but it's very important to know your scope of practice as a CNA, and that's also going to be based from state to state. I'm just going to do like the overall view of everyone's scope of practice, but please make sure you refer to your own state's curriculum along with scope of practice before you test. So we're gonna cover a couple of practice questions. I don't know if you all are familiar with me, how I post questions on Facebook. You pause and then I explain the rationale for why every question is incorrect and why every answer is correct and incorrect. Also post on TikTok and YouTube. I will also send those links through. It's about probably about 20 or so practice questions on there, and we'll do a few here. But I'll send those links through the email so everyone will be able to go look at that. Also, if you want to take notes, all of that stuff is fine. But I am recording the session for those that couldn't make it, and also I'll link that to the YouTube as well if anyone wants to go back and review. So, what is the most important job of a CNA? What do you think the most important responsibility of a CNA is? It's going to be patient safety. Everything on the test usually comes back to safety. Like it's just that's gonna be the most important thing. Um, you're there to help assist, and I don't mean it in a way that can come off as rude, but like I said, that goes back to kind of overstepping those boundaries. So patient safety is going to be the number one priority. So if you see a question and you're trying to figure out, what's going to be most important, usually if you choose that patient safety, that's going to be the likelihood of you getting that question right. Infection control, hand hygiene is number one. We know that we're taught that the very first day you walk in the hospital, that's very important. Hand hygiene, you'll do it when you come in the room. You'll do it when you go out the room. When you're assisting a resident with something in the room, you'll take up every time you put on gloves, every time you remove gloves. If you don't remember anything else, please, please, please remember infection control. It's heavily tested. It's a big percentage of your test, and that's also going to be sometimes a bold step when you do go to do those skills testing. Again, this is more so for the written test, but knowing your information for the written test will help with skills and vice versa as well. Infection control is also going to go towards that PPE and knowing your precautions. So your basics for precautions of your standard precautions, it's just going to be hand hygiene and also using common sense of when you see, okay, well, I'm going to deal with any type of bodily fluids, you need to put on gloves, anything of that nature. Your contact precautions, that's going to be, excuse me, I have my newborn, so I get to mute myself or you hear some noises because I'm dealing with him. But contact precautions is going to be your CDF, anything that you can contract by touching. You're not going to want to touch. Again, that'll be bodily fluids, like if you're helping a resident to the restroom, bed baths, bed pans, anything of that nature. That's not considered basically contact, but you'll think of it the same way. I tend to explain stuff so it's easier to understand. Now, I'm not saying, okay, if a patient is getting a bed bath, their own contact precautions. No, but anything with those bodily fluids, again, you're going to, want to gown up, dress up so you don't get that on you. But again, CDF is going to be your biggest one. Usually CDF is going to be tested. If it say anything about contact, the question is going to be CDF. For its droplet, that's going to be your flu and airborne. That's tuberculosis. They ended up classifying COVID-19 as airborne and droplet. And that'll go more into detail about wearing your goggles, gloves, gowns, N95 respirators, surgical masks, etc. One that's also heavily tested, and I know it's also a skill question. It's going to be how to put on PPE and it's going to say done PPE and doff PPE. So you'll put PPE on, you'll put on your gown first, your mask, your goggles, then your gloves. And when you'll remove your gloves first, your goggles, your gown, then your mask. And a way to help remember that is you're going to remove your gloves first. Is You're going to remove your gloves first because that's what you're going to touch the most. So whatever you're doing, that's probably going to be the most contact that you have with that item is through your gloves. And then you take off your goggles, then your gown and your mask. But please remember your gloves first because if you do not take your gloves off first, everything else you're touching to remove, you're contaminating it. So if you take off your goggles, you can be putting that towards your eyes, your gown. You can be putting that on your scrubs to possibly take that to other patients' rooms. And then your mask, that's back up there with your eyes, your mouth, nose. Those are important areas that you don't want to transfer whatever you've been touching to that. And please always remember, we wash hands before and after patient contact and after removing gloves. Also to be on the safe side before you put on gloves because it'll be like before patient contact. So everyone kind of following along pretty decently. I know I can tend to talk fast. I'm going to take that as a yes. Next, we'll move on to safety and patient rights. The biggest thing, you want to keep that call like within reach. Your bed in lowest position, never restrain without order, and respect privacy and dignity. The test loves safety questions, so if you're stuck, pick the safest answer. Like for example, if a patient is trying to get out of bed, what would you do? You would stay with the patient. You would call for help. That goes back to one of the questions I have posted on the TikTok and the Facebook of a patient's trying to get out of bed, which one would be the least restrictive? The least restrictive would be a bed alarm. Like I said, staying with the patient. You wouldn't want to put the patient in restraints or anything of that nature because that'll go, like I said, towards the scope of practice, but also safety of we don't want to restrain the patient, but also safety and hurting yourself. We don't want to strain ourselves. So no need to tussle and wrestle with the patient. Just try to keep them, you know, bed in the lowest position, keep them calm, things of that nature. And that'll go back to communication as well. Again, safety is a big one that's tested. So if you don't know what the answer is, safety, and that goes to patient safety, but also staff safety. And you may see a few questions on there about how you need to properly handle yourself as far as trying to pick up a patient, transferring bedpans, things of that nature as well. So scope of practice, that's what I was talking about earlier. Your scope of practice, your scope of practice, that's gonna change from state to state. Not only as a CNA, but if you do decide to do nursing, medical assistance, anything of that nature, you need to make sure you are familiar with your scopes of practice. CNAs can assist with ADLs and take vital signs. They cannot give medicines, they cannot diagnose, and they cannot assess. Those things are very important, and I stress very important. What I see people mess up on the most, again, is not understanding that scope of practice. Even if you do it at your job, if it is not in the textbook, if it is not in your state's curriculum of what you're allowed to do as a CNA, it is incorrect. It can get you into a lot of trouble. It can get you into some jail time, depending on how far you push it and what you how far you push it and what you allow yourself to do. You've worked hard for your CNA license. You don't want to risk that by not understanding your scope of practice. So please know that. You have to know that. Again, I can't go into a whole lot of detail about it because it's going to vary from state to state. But again, your big thing is your medicines, your diagnosis, your assessing. Like you can't insert a catheter. And I also want to say too, knowing your scope of practice will also go into communication because we're about to go into that next. But if something is happening, yes, you'll make a mental note of what's going on and you'll document what you're supposed to. But you also have to inform the nurse. You have to follow the chain of command. So from the CNA, if there's the LPN at your facility, you'll tell your LPN will go up the chain of command to your RN. Your RN will go to the charge nurse and or the supervisor, or the RN would go to the doctor. Again, depending on your facility and how that chain of command works. But that's going to go, like I said, that's part of your scope of practice as well. So knowing what to report and then when to take action. Communication. Not only does this go with Not only does this go with staff, but it goes with patients as well. You want to be calm and respectful. We don't argue with patients. And I ain't gonna say we don't argue with staff because I've been there and done that. But we don't argue with patients most importantly, and we report changes to the nurse. Again, that's that chain of command, knowing what to report, knowing what to take action on, knowing when to report it, how to report it. Again, that's going to be facility protocol. But far as communicating with the patient, um, communication questions are common. I always choose the most respectful and calm response. For example, a patient is angry. What would you do? You acknowledge their feelings. You stay calm. Also, you don't want to seem like you're shutting a patient out. So if a patient is experiencing pain, or if they're saying, "Hey, my grandson Billy, he came to visit me and it made me sad." You don't want to just say okay, or you don't want to be like, okay, I'll tell the nurse. You want to have that open communication and also build that rapport with their patient of like, okay, would you like to talk about why Billy made you sad? Tell me more about Billy. Is there anything I can do to help you? Things of that nature. Because again, you're building that rapport. You want to be respectful. You want to acknowledge how they feel. You don't want to just brush them off because that can cause a line of conflict. Not only when you're working with the patient, but also when you start bringing family into the situation. So that could be tested as well. Just remember, choose the most therapeutic response. You don't want to come off like you're brushing them off, like you don't care about their feelings. You want to acknowledge that. So, practice question. We're going to apply some of what we've learned thus far. So, a confused patient, a confused patient is trying to get out of bed. What would you do first? Again, you're going to stay with the patient and call for help. You don't want to leave the patient, but you also know you may need some help. That goes back to not want to strain your body, not want to hurt yourself. So that's how we're gonna handle that situation. When should you wash your hands? We're gonna wash your hands before and after patient contact. And that goes back to hand hygiene and hand washing can be used interchangeably, but it's important to know the difference. Hand washing physically with soap and water, and also using hand sanitizer suffices as the word hand hygiene. But if you see hand washing means soap and water. So I do for a fact know just about in every single state on your skills test, it's gonna say hand washing, and that's what we're about to go into next. It's gonna say hand washing, and hand washing, you have to physically go to the sink with soap and water to wash your hands. So if you are testing on the written test as well, and it says the steps for hand washing, you need to know to list those steps for hand washing. Physically washing your hands in the sink. Hand hygiene is either physically washing your hands or using sanitizer. Please do not mix those two up. Hand hygiene, you can use either or. Hand washing is physically washing your hands. So we'll hand wash when our hands are visibly soiled, sealed, those when we come up those precautions, things of that nature. Hand hygiene will suffice when we're going in the room, when we're going out of the room, when we take off our gloves, and we're just trying to kill those germs. Which task is outside of CNA scope? Again, administering medications, assessing things of that nature that fall more into the nurse category. Most of all those questions that we did review and we've talked about thus far is safety. It all goes back to safety. That's going to be most important. That's going to be highly tested. About 80% of your tests, even though it's not technically ranked as safety, it's going to be safety. Also, when I'm talking about safety, I do want to go back to recap on the fact of also what falls under your safety categories are going to be your pass, your aim, your race. That's your fire extinguisher, um, fire safety. Those are also tested as well. So please be familiar with what your pass means and what your race means. You don't want to get those messed up because I've seen people get the A's switched around and pass and race, and you want to know the difference in those two and what they're asking for each one. So skills review, hand washing. You're gonna hand wash for 20 seconds. You're gonna make sure you thoroughly wash your hands. Again, I've seen the script of everything you need to do. It's very long. It's a lot of steps to it. So just take your time and make sure you do it correctly. Yes, your skills test is timed, but use that time to wash your hands. You want to make sure you do that right. It's a lot of steps. You're not going to lose points for washing your hands too long. If you wash your hands a full 45 seconds, it doesn't matter. But you want to hit those steps because that can be part of your bowl. So when you're washing your hands, you're going to do their here, so I wish I had my camera on. I would show. You'll do your circle scrub into your hands to get up under your cuticle, well, up under your fingernails. You got to make sure you clean your wrists thoroughly. And what I'll do, I may upload a video on how to thoroughly wash your hands because I do see people that mess that up. It's important to when you dry your hands, you're using your state's proper way. I will say there are a few steps that are different between each curriculum, each state, but for the most part, they're all gonna excuse me, they're all gonna be the same. Hand washing requires a full 20 seconds. When tested, excuse me, when testing, I would recommend just counting your head 30 seconds, 40 seconds, because sometimes we can get nervous. We start counting too fast, and before we know it, it's like, oh, it's only been 5 seconds, and I haven't thoroughly washed my hands. Key points I do want to hit on hand washing. Make sure that when you are turning off your sink, you are using paper towels. Do not touch the nozzle after you wash your hands. Do not touch the nozzle after you wash your hands. And do not touch the nozzle after you wash your hands. I say that because you will wash your hands, everything will be perfect, and then before you know it, you've hit it to turn it off. You want to turn it off with a paper towel. You can use many paper towels as you want. Get a clean one. After you dry your hands to turn it off. Use the same one. It doesn't matter, but do not touch it because you have recontaminated it. Again, I'll say the same thing with sometimes with some states there's a skill for denture cleaning. Some people do it in a basin, but some people do it in the sink. You're gonna use the same rules and regulations with that. Make sure you're touching stuff appropriately. You're not gonna want to touch the sink and then with the clean, then touch the dentures, get them clean, and then touch the sink, and then touch the dentures. Just be careful with those things because those can be marked off and held against you. Locking the bed and wheelchair before transfer. Um, Depending on the skill, that can be a bowl, especially with if you're doing, like I said, a transfer of ambulate the patient 20 steps or I can't think of the other one right now off the top of my head, but I do know that's one of them. You have to lock that bed in that wheelchair, or it will be held against you. That goes back to also like non-skid shoes or socks. Safety. Biggest thing is safety. If we're transferring a patient from the bed to the wheelchair, and that wheelchair gets to sliding from under them, or that bed gets to moving on us, and we cannot catch that patient. Excuse me, we cannot catch the patient. So we want to make sure those things are locked before we move on. Like I said, even if this is a written test, skill knowledge helps you answer questions. Um, Test taking tips. If two answers look right, you always want to pick the safest one, because that goes back to safety first. You have to choose the safest one. If one is saying, and they usually won't be contraindicated of each other. Usually, so a question usually won't have an answer that says lock the bed or non-skid shoes. Usually, that's not the case. But sometimes you can run into that situation of where it says, and that's when you have to read closely, where it says lock the bed or put on house slippers or put on fuzzy socks. If it says put on fuzzy socks, or if it does not specify non-skid, shoes or socks, you're gonna choose lock that bed, because um you're not adding context to the question. And when I was testing to become a nurse, I will say that was a personal fault of mine. I would tend to very often actually add more information to the test question. I would overthink it. I was okay, well, if it's socks, well, they're in the hospital, so I know they're group socks. But no, do not add more information than what the question is giving you. If it says socks, it's not implying safety. Slip grid sock, non-skid socks. I'm just making up words. Non-skid grip socks, and the other answer is lock the bed. Lock the bed. That's like you have to make sure you choosing safety first. Also, don't overthink it. The test is basic. It is a little tricky. Some people will say it's not tricky. It's easy. It's simple. It's not. It's made to be tricky because they want to make sure you know how to not just read the book, but also know how to apply what you've learned from that book. But it's not to scare you and saying, okay, well, it's tricky. It's just to make sure that you understand what you're reading and what you're understanding. But don't think more into the test than what you have to. Oh, excuse me. um, like I said, don't add extra info. Do not add extra info. Read all answers. You, like I said, if you see socks, you're gonna automatically think, "Oh, boom! I know they need socks on," but no, because it's not none. None. I just keep making up that word. It's not non-skid socks. It's not grip socks. So if it doesn't say that and you click socks and then the correct answer was lock bed and that was C, now you've missed that question because you've ran through by trying to hurry up and finish it. Also, eliminate incorrect choices. The ones that you know are incorrect. The ones that have nothing to do with the situation. Um, like if it says you do not have to give the call light if da 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 da. But we know that's incorrect. We know we always make sure the call light doesn't reach. That goes back to safety. Why? Because that cuts down on falls. Because the patient is able to just call us so we can help. They're not trying to get up on their own to get the call light or get up on their own to try to do whatever it is that they need assistance with. So for part of the recap, again, infection control, you need to know those precautions. Those are important. You need to know the difference in standard precautions, contact precautions, and droplet precautions and airborne precautions. You want to know the difference in those, not necessarily what all they are, because usually it won't say if you have a patient with the flu. Usually it won't say that, but it's good to be familiar with those common ones. So flu, COVID, C. diff, and tuberculosis. Those are more so heavily tested if you want to be more specific. But know those precautions, know what you have to wear in each precaution. So the biggest ones with infection, like I said, just knowing what to wear, how to put the gown, gloves, goggles, and mask on, how to take the gown, gloves, goggles, and mask off. I did not say that in the correct order. I just listed it all off of what you wear in the top of my head. But know those infection controls. Safety. Remember to lock that bed. Remember to lock the wheelchair. Remember to put on the right shoes, socks. Remember your call lights. Scope of practice. Like I said, state to state. Make sure you review your state scope of practice before you take your test. Make sure you review your I lost my train of thought. Make sure you review your book. Again, you're not the big ones. You're not gonna assess. You're not gonna insert catheters. You're not gonna be diagnosing. You're not gonna give medications. You're gonna do things that more so falls under the assistance of. So bed baths, helping assist. Usually, if it says assist the patient, usually that's going to be a correct answer for you. Also, to go back to test taking skills, it's a personal tip of mine. I do not go back and review questions. That's me. I don't review them because usually when we review, and again, if you plan to go to be a nurse, nursing school and NCLEX, you cannot go back and re-answer questions. Once you hit next, it's gone. You cannot go back. Now, I'm not saying if you skip a question to not go back. If you skip a question, that's fine. Go back and answer that question if you feel like you gained more knowledge throughout the test. But me personally, if I did not skip a question, me just going back reviewing my questions, I'm not gonna do so. Just because usually that's when we go back and overthink things, or we think, okay, well, question 40 was worded similar to this. So if question 40 was worded kind of like this, then question 20, this must be wrong. Well, I don't really know on 40. I kind of guess. Don't do that. If you are confident and read the question, read your answers, read your question again, answer it. That's it. That's all. Move on to the next one. If you do not know the answer, flag it, go to the next one. But take don't go back through all of your questions and sit there with each question, but well, I kind of knew that, but I don't really know. Did I know that? Because you're less likely to choose the correct answer the second time. More often than not, we go back and change our answer because we didn't go with our first mind. And we had it right the first time. So if you got it right the first time, choose the answer. Don't go back and keep it pushing. I did forget to say in the beginning, too, for most states, it changes from 60 to 90 questions, but your test is timed. And I guess this is going to test taking tips. Your test is timed. Please be mindful of when you take your test of that time. Now, you don't have to sit there and watch the clocks because just on the average, if I'm testing 10 students, usually a good 7 or 8 are finished way before the time is due. But your test is going to automatically submit itself. You want to make sure that you are getting the credit that you can. So if you see you are on question 40, you still have 30 more questions to go, you are down to your last 5 minutes, pick an answer. Even if you don't have time to review it all thoroughly, if you are running out of time, pick an answer because your test is going to grade itself. So if you don't put anything, you're going to automatically get a zero. Same thing with the skills. The skills is time. Usually you get 3 to 5 skills and you get about 30 minutes to do all of those skills. So please be mindful of your time. Of course there will be timers set, but when you're in the zone and you're stressed, things of that nature, you're not typically paying attention to that. So you want to make sure you are being mindful of your time and trying to maximize your points. With the skills as well, if you are doing a skill that you're not the most familiar with, but the next skill it is, like if one skill is pericare. I'm glad I said that because someone asked me to go into detail about pericare and catheter care, and I will in just a second. But if you are not that familiar with catheter care, but you do know how to wash your hands, I'm not saying skim through it, but if you're running out of time, make sure you focus on washing those hands to get the most points that you can because it's time and you can't pass half the test and then take the other half later. You have to do it all at one time. So just don't sell yourself short by running out of time. Make sure you're giving something for the computer to grade. Even if it's not the right thing, you put something. Just know like I said, with the recap of infection control, safety, scope, communication, um, if you focus on those 4 areas, you are already ahead. That's what's going to be the biggest thing. Also, I like I said, I'm a nurse. I've been doing this a couple years now. For since August, I've been a proctor. I see what people mess up. I understand the test for the most part now. I know how to help people pass. I offer tutoring services. I offer study guides, outlines, things of that nature. Right now, they're at a low cost. depending on your state, how many questions you want. My questions, they come with rationales. I give you the correct answer, the wrong answer, rationales for all. I create your own classroom with the one-on-one tutoring to help you understand what you need to pass. Like I said, all those things are at a low cost. Low cost at this time. If anyone wants to add on that purchase, we can discuss that after everyone leaves the Zoom. If you want to discuss that, or if you want to shoot me an email or a text to my work number, all those things are fine as well. Also, I post on TikTok. I post on YouTube. I post on Facebook, but since this last post got over 100 and something comments, the post did get flagged. That's why it was hard to respond to some people. Some stuff had to be moved around. It would not let me respond to any more comments. I had got locked out. Admin had to approve my stuff, and by then, of course, the post had died down. So but again, my business card have been posted. If anyone is interested in any of the extras, they can let me know. Again, this will be linked in the YouTube once I edit it and get it all covered up with everyone's identity, things of that nature. I'll also send this in an email, and so everyone will have it. So again, if y'all were here and you didn't take notes, or you just want to go back and recap it before your test, or listen to the audio of it, whatever the nature may be, I'll send this in the email as well. I did want to leave a few minutes so that anyone, pericare and catheter care, make sure you review those things, and make sure when you are testing that you are paying attention to what, instead of go more into skills, but make sure you are paying attention to what the test observer is reading off. If it's pericare and there's a catheter, you want to pay attention to the pericare of it. Usually they'll take the catheter out, but it's important to know. Or if it's catheter care, you're not gonna have to do the whole peri area. You're just gonna swipe the catheter, clean your catheter. Um, I lost my train of thought. Because Alex, I knew I had left where I had asked, did anyone have any questions, and I know that was something someone specifically asked. And I may do another one because this was more so for the RIN, but I may do another one for skills of where I can physically demonstrate those things that you all are needing. I'll probably get up and upload a couple videos on YouTube later on what people were requesting as well. With that period care and catheter care, though, what is important and what I do know can be counted off against you when you are doing those swipes, that left swipe, right swipe, middle swipe. Make sure you are folding your towel. You do not want to wipe over a new area with the same dirty towel. One swipe, fold. One swipe, fold. Honestly, if you get tangled up, just discard the towel, get a whole new towel. That can be counted against you. I know I've counted against it time and time again. You'll clean the area correctly, but you will use the same part of the towel. They do not consider that cleaning. They consider that actually contaminating the new area that you are trying to clean. So make sure you are using a new clean portion of the towel. Again, you're running on a room with a clean towel. Aside from that, did anyone have any questions that they would like for me to answer before we finish off today? So, with your transfers from wheelchair to gait belt, you want to make sure you have that gait belt on properly. Again, that'll be more of a skills thing that I have to find a belt and show a tutorial on how to do it. But you want to make sure you grip it properly and stand behind the patient to kind of help with that safety issue. And make sure that you have the right socks on. Make sure your wheelchair is locked. Make sure your bed is locked. That's usually what the skills will say for your checkoff. Making sure you can put those two fingers in between that gate belt and that you're holding it properly. Also, do not try to pretend to, if you don't know how to put on the gate belt, go ahead and look up the YouTube video now, or ask your instructor if you're still in school, whatever the situation may be. Go ahead and practice with the gate belt, because some people don't know how to put it on properly, and they'll put it on and they'll try to hold it and try to pretend that it's not, to pretend that it's tight. The proctor, the observer can see that. Make sure you're doing it the proper way, because when you get ready to have your patient, you're going to want to do it the proper way. So check those two fingers. Make sure it's tight and snug, but you can move it. Hold the end of that belt, stand behind them, and walk with them. When you go to help them sit down, make sure you do your 1, 2, 3 count. Make sure that back of that wheelchair is hitting those make sure the wheelchair seat is hitting the back of those knees before the resident sits down. Make sure the wheelchair is locked before they sit down. Depending on your skills. I know with Mississippi, you don't have to have the footrest. The footrests are not on the wheelchair. But depending on your state, make sure you're putting those feet properly in the wheelchair. And your car light and stuff is still important. So make sure when you're finished, if it calls for it, go ahead and just move that wheelchair a little bit back to that call light so you'll know that it's in reach and they're able to get it. Any other questions? Okay, well, we finished a little early. I've kind of covered everything I have on my end. Since no one has any questions, I'll get to editing it so I can get everything uploaded. I'll try to send an outline of what I've talked about to the emails if I can get it all typed up today. Best of luck to everyone that has not tested yet. I hope everyone passed with flying colors. Um, I hope everyone has a great day and thank y'all so much for joining. I really appreciate it. It means the world to me for me to keep doing it when I have people actually come, participate, and ask questions. So that's all for me. Thank y'all for coming. Have a great day.